All right. So you have already probably seen the announcement. This is the application that we're going to be building. You can see the login and register over here. And let's just do a very quick demo of what we're going to have at the end. I'm going to go here to America and let's go to LA. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to try to pin a location that I like. Now, obviously I was never in LA. So I'm just going to go to the Long Beach because it sounds nice. And here at Weston, I'm going to pin. So I'm going to say this is a, I don't know, a hotel probably, or a motel because there is a sleeping person. So as you can see, this thing over here. And then I'm going to say review. This is a very nice place. All right. And I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Let's remove this. And I'm going to add pin. Now you're going to see right over here that we cannot add pin because we are not logged into account. Now I'm going to go to login and we're going to have this form. And sorry about the moving, but my screen is actually pretty big and I have to move the recording area a bit. So let's just going to log into the account that I have made. Log in and you're going to see login successfully from the server here. And now I can go to the Weston and I can say hotel, and not a very nice place this time, right? Because I changed my mind. Add pin and you're going to see that I have added a pin successfully. And now I can zoom out and I can see my pin. Now I'm going to choose a color for your own pins, the pins that you create on your account, and the other people are going to have their pins. So as you can see, this one is created by Spider-Man, and this one over here is created by Pedawa. Right? Very nice. And of course, I'm just going to log out, clicking on the logout button. Let me just show you how this looks, because as I said, sorry for moving around the recording area, but there is no other way. So I'm going to click on this logout, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to log out and boom, log out from and the username that you have chosen. And of course, the pin is actually changing. So you can rotate the map. You can do quite a lot of stuff. You can register and log in. First, we're going to start with the backend. So let's begin the build. All right, so I'm starting the build from scratch and I'm actually creating a folder called MERN YouTube Part 1. So let's go to open folder. All right, now we have the project. Now, the first thing that you want to do is to open up command prompt and write Node over here. And you should see a version of Node.js. Now, we're going to be using Node, and this is going to be what our backend is built upon. So be sure that you have Node installed. Obviously, as usual, I'm going to put the link down below, and you can always just click the link and download the current version. So obviously, I'm going to exit now. And the first thing that I want to do is to create a folder called the server and another folder called the client. So I'm going to have the server and the client. So this is going to be the backend and the front end. And I'm going to begin with the server part, right? The first thing that we want to do is to actually head on to the server. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to control and tilde to open up my terminal. And here I can say list. So I'm going to list and I'm going to see the 2 folders that I've built. So I'm going to say cd server and I am currently in server. Now, we are going to install a couple of stuff. So the first one is node install express. And let's see what the problem is. Cannot find module install thrower. Was it node install? Hardly doubt it, but all right, let's see how to install. I did head to the documentation, and here you can see it was actually npm install, not node. So note that, and let's actually go to our thing. List that we're in the current folder and say npm install express. Good. So we're having problems, and the problem is making directory operation not permitted. If you see this, it means that we have not permissions. So probably if I say, oh no, actually I can create a folder. That's very interesting. So let's actually try to fix this. All right, so I did get it to work, and I'm actually going to be honest. I just read the documentation. So the first thing that I do is npm init. This is going to be creating my file, and it's going to be creating this package JSON over here. So it's going to create this. And finally, after this, I'm even going to show you the commands. So the first command was npm init, right? Then it was obviously to list what I have, and I had this package JSON. Then I have npm install express, which is what they say right over here. Always read the documentation. It is something that we learn to do. Then clear, obviously to clear the solution. And we are having this package installed. The next thing that we want is mongoose. So let's clear list where we are at and say npm install mongoose. Now I did open the site over here, but there is no, oh no, that's read documentations. Yeah, you can also see how to work with it. I'm going to explain it to you, of course, but this time we didn't have any problems. Oh, and by the way, one thing that I did behind camera is to open the Visual Studio as administrator. So keep that in mind. If the documentation about the Express is not working for you, open the Visual Studio as administrator. Good. So what are we actually having currently? Currently, we're having the Express. So that's going to be Express and Mongoose. So why do we need these? We're going to use this here to open a port and to listen to somewhere. So this is going to be our listening to the client. And this thing over here is our DB. It's not SQL, it's Mongoose. And we're going to be creating schemas. So when the client wants to send something to the server as data, so for example, PIN or user, right? Because we're logging in, I need to take it, map it to the Mongoose and see if it's going to work out. So this here is going to be used for the DB, and this here is going to be used for the initial listening and port opening. All right, now I'm actually here in Cloud MongoDB. Now let's talk about databases for just a little bit. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. Here you can choose two things. So you can either choose a local or obviously cloud, right? A local means that you need to be opening your own server into your PC. So this is going to be your PC, even though it's quite ugly. And you're going to have the DB right over here as a file. So for example, you can use a file, or you can use something like the registries in Windows. If you actually open this regedit, these are the database that Windows is actually using. And I don't know where this is positioned, probably somewhere around in C drive, where your OS is installed. And you can do the same thing with Mongo, right? You can open it in D drive or some flash drive, and you can obviously start it as a server and access stuff on it. However, I am going to use the cloud, which is going to have my PC right over here running the server, and I'm going to connect to the cloud, right, in order for me to access my database. And I'm going with this variant because here you can actually choose monitoring, you can browse your collections, and it's very easy to see how many connections we're actually doing in a minute. And in real time, I think that you can do it with local as well. Of course you can. But here it's just, a lot nicer, and I really like it. You can see the network, you can see the logical size, you can see the connections made. Now, you're going to be greeted with this database deployment over here, and you are going to need to click on the create button, which is right over here on the right part of the screen for you. As I said, I'm recording on a bigger screen, so my button is actually way to the right, but it's there. Now, we also set view monitoring, browse connect collections, browse collections. And here you can do also connect. Now, this connect is how you're going to connect your node to the Mongo. You can say connect your application, and here you can choose the Node.js that you're running. So in my case, this is 4.1 or later. I can choose either a password, and you're going to see my connection string, which is right over this one. So be sure to copy that once you create your DB, and let's go back to Visual Studio. Oh, and by the way, one thing that I forgot to mention is you can see setup connection security, choose the connection method, and finally on the part of the connect. Now, once you actually start creating the base, you're going to see it's very natural. I really like Mongo, and I really like their site. So you are going to choose a username and a password. Now, obviously, in real time, in real production code, you want to choose something interesting. But I chose admin and admin, right? So most people choose admin and root, or root and admin. These are what I chose. So this is my username and this is my password. Again, you're going to see them in these steps. Let's go back to Visual Studio. All right, the first thing we want to do is to actually create our initial input. Now, keep in mind, you can code this whatever, but I am going to go with index.js. So this is what I'm going to be running. And of course, you guessed it, it doesn't matter what my name is. So I'm going to say node and then index.js, right? So once again, something to note is, this is very important. When we're running JavaScript in the browser, right? So let's say that this is going to be Google. And if we're running JavaScript on the browser, we're actually using V8, which is Google's C++ version of an interpreter. And it actually takes the JavaScript code and runs it. However, you're not having V8 in your machine, right? And that's why Node comes. So Node is something that you can imagine it as a wrapper, and it's actually basically that, a wrapper in V8. So it's taking the V8 and it's producing code that can interpret your code in your local machine, right? So this is a bit more advanced, but you can just say, okay, Node is nothing more than just a V8 wrapper, right? That's able to run on my machine, because the V8 is not able to run on my machine. So that's pretty much it. So in order for you to start something, and I can say console log whatever, I am going to need to say Node, right? This is what I'm going to use in order to execute my code, and I'm going to go with index. And obviously, we are not having anything because currently I didn't set up the necessary stuff. But this is how you actually run your code. So let's actually fix that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first say const express is going to be equal to a require express. Then I'm actually going to set up my mongoose. So I'm going to say const mongoose is going to be equal to require mongoose. Finally, I need to set up the application. So I'm going to say application is going to be equal to express. And currently, I'm able to open up ports and listen to them. So I'm going to explain what this means, but let's first say application.listen. And I'm going to specify the port, whatever you want, and the function that's going to be running after successfully opening the port. And I'm going to say console walk, and I'm going to say listening to port, and let's run that. So node index, and you can see here that we are actually achieving our result. Now, obviously, I cannot do that, but here is the listening to port. So we're able to successfully interpret JavaScript code in our local machine, right? We're not running this in any browser. We're not doing anything. We're just running it on our machine. So that is very interesting. So what I want to show you is also, if we go to command prompt and say netstat, and then I'm going to go to the pipe, and I'm going to be searching for, actually, I'm not going to search anything. Netstat, you're going to see all of the current ports. So we're actually opening and establishing connections, as you can see, throughout the machine. What this means is that I have a socket. So this is going to be an IP and port, and I'm able to listen to traffic, right? Obviously, the firewall is standing over here, so it can block certain stuff, but this doesn't matter. What I want to show you, though, is that we are currently having a port open 7800. Now, if I go here and I say netstat, find O, and then put it through the pipeline, I'm going to search for 7800, you're going to see that I have something called desktop lunar, whatever that is, and it's listening to a port. It's very interesting. It's not established connection, keep in mind. So I'm going to wonder, all right, is this TCP connection here open for me? What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, Control C to stop my server, and currently I'm going to go to the command prompt again. I'm going to say netstat O, and I'm going to try to find again this thing. Let's go with 78. And you're going to see 78 is found, but 7800 is now nowhere to be found because this was our port opened and waiting for a connection. So that's very interesting. Keep that in mind. You can also see if you're running some ports. This is very useful information in your life. Let's exit this now and let's try to connect the mongoose. Now I am in mongoose in the documentation. Again, the documentation is your friend, and I've clicked here on connections. As you can see, they're saying mongoose.connect. You can connect to MongoDB with the mongoose connect method, and they're showing you how. So I'm just going to take this and copy it. Now, actually, if I have to be completely honest, I have not copied yet. Let's do something like this. All right, and I'm going to, I lost my copy, whatever. I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to go back to the MongoDB thing, which I was calling, and then we're going to connect with this. So first of all, I did copy this mongoose connect once again over here. So let's actually put it into our server. All right, now what I can do is I can say mongoose.connect, and actually I think I did copy it, so Control V, and you're going to see this. So MongoDB, blah, 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 whatever. This is called the connection string. Whenever you want to connect to a database, you have a connection string. And you can see that in the connection string, we actually have certain information. So one thing that's very interesting is here we have the authorization source. And we are going to be needing to write, I believe, our username and password, or at least 1 month ago I needed to, and you do not want this thing, this connection string, to be available to other people, right? So we can just put it into another file and not upload it to GitHub or not upload it to the production code, and that way we can secure that we're not going to have DB dumps, for example, which is something to prevent the hackers, right? But I'm not going to go in depth about security. For now, I'm just going to copy this, which is the MongoDB, and head back to the Visual Studio. All right, now there is something called .env, and it stands for environment. So I'm going to say npm install, and I'm going to say .env. So let's first get this out of the way, install it, clear, and let's see what we have. All right, we are into the server. I'm going to add, not a folder, sorry. I'm going to add a file, and I'm going to call it .env, and this is going to be my environment. And here I can just say connection string. So this is going to be connection string Mongo, or actually Mongo connection string. And it's going to be equal to this thing over here. The one thing that I can note is that the security mechanism is some authorization mechanism X509. I do not want that. So I'm going to head back to the cloud Mongo. I'm going to say connection string. And here you're going to see add your connection string into your application mode. And I've chosen this X509. I do not want this. I want the password scram. So I want this connection string. There we go, copy. And now this is obviously going to have your username and your password. And you do not want to show this. That's why we created the environment file. Now let's get back to the Visual Studio, delete everything here, and put the new connection string. All right. Here we have the password. And as I said, I did use admin as a password. So obviously I'm just going to copy here and save my password, because once again, here we set password, and this should be changed to your own password, which is in my case admin. So the password that you have chosen, you're going to write it over here. All right. So currently we do have this connection string, and we have placed admin, and let's go back to index, and here we're going to try to connect. So what we're going to be using for connection? Well, I'm going to say process.environment and the name in the environment file, which is going to be Mongo connection string. So I'm going to place it over here, and then I'm going to write .10, and here is going to be the function to run if this is successful. I'm going to console log success, I don't know. All right, so currently I'm going to run that. And oh yeah, before we are actually using an environment file, what you need to do is to say const.env or environment, whatever, is going to be equal to require, and here I'm going to be requiring .env, right? And in order for me to take this as a data, I need to say environment.config, and of course, finally, everything is going to be all right. So currently, I'm going to say node index, and I do expect everything to work. And as you can see, listening to port and success. So we have successfully connected to Mongo. If I go over here, you're going to see my connections. So I do have some connections over here. And these are the ones that I did for testing, right? So you can see that we have an open connection over here. I do not know why it's saying 4, to be completely honest. I have a couple of servers running on that, but I don't believe they're 4, I believe they're 3. And you have one bot, because they are actually using one bot to monitor. So yeah, 4 connections currently. All right, good job. So now we have actually connected to the Mongo, and we are ready to start doing work. Okay, so before we actually do some work, I do want to show you a very neat trick. This is something very important, and that you're going to do it in your professional career quite a lot, at least I do it, is there is no way for me to take any clue of the things that I have actually got, right? Because when we're talking about logging, I'm going to go this back and I run it. You're going to see that I'm opening the server, and here I have listening to port success. You're not just going to go and read throughout everything, because as soon the server gets big, you're not going to have the time, right? You cannot go through everything. So I'm going to show you something very cool that I do. I haven't seen anyone teaching this in YouTube, so I'm going to show you this professional trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say console log, and here I'm going to say like this. So I'm going to go success, and I'm going to say backend server started. Right? So I'm going to actually do the same thing over here, and I'm going to say success MongoDB connected. Good. So let's do it like this. Okay, and now I am going to start my server again, and you're going to see, okay, success, success. So obviously you do not need to read in production code and when you're debugging these success things over here, right? But it was going to be very nice if there was some way to actually make them green, because I do not want to look at success. I want to look at something which is going to be a failure because I need to fix it. And let's say that the fails are going to be red. It was going to be very interesting if there was a way to do it without my paint program over here. And there is. So what I'm going to do is first we have a string over here. And now I need to say, now I need to say what kind of a color am I going to do? So I'm going to go with x1b 42 m%s. And this is something that is in the documentation, x1b om, right? So let's actually check this again. Boom, you can see success lighted up green. Now this is very cool because if you have problems, right, you're going to notice failures very well. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm actually going to stop the server. Every time you actually do a change to the server, you need to stop it. There is a way around that, but I'm not going to show you this currently. So I'm going to copy this thing over here and place it in front of Mongo. So now when I actually start again, you're going to see success, success. They are green. I know that they have no problems. I'm not going to look into them. So let's actually see how are we going to simulate a failure. That's interesting. Let's now clear that. And here I'm going to say then, and of course I'm going to say catch. So I'm going to be catching an error and I'm going to be producing something with it, right? So obviously I'm just going to console log it. So I'm just going to say this, console log. Here I'm going to say failed. And here I'm going to say MongoDB connected. Failed, MongoDB connected. Failed to connect probably MongoDB. Let's write it that. Failed connection to MongoDB. All right, very well. And in order to make it red, I need to put 1 over here. Right, that's the only change that you need to do. So now I'm going to be failing connection to MongoDB, but how am I actually going to produce this fail? Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to write a wrong password. Right. So currently, I do expect Mongo not to work. So boom, there we go. Success, backend server started, and failed connection to MongoDB. Now this is actually pretty amazing because now you can see this failed over here, and you're going to go, oh, all right, I know where this code is produced. You're going to find it, and you're going to see, okay, I'm having some problems, and now we can start debugging it. Well, obviously, I know the problem. I just need to change my password, but as I said, in real production code, this is very helpful. And again, we have everything to work. That's a fantastic feature, and you should be very well acquainted with it, and you should be using it whenever you can. Okay, now we're back after a pause that you're probably not going to be noticing. And I am going to begin with creating schemas. So the schemas are going to be the code models. So I'm going to say, not new file, sorry, new folder, and I'm going to call them models. Now, what is a schema? Now, if I'm going to store, let's say that I'm going to create this thing, and this thing here is going to be called pin, right? So I'm going to just write it pin. That's very bad, but I'm going to write pin. Then I'm actually going to go with user. And of course, this goes both ways to whatever you're going to do. Now I'm going to write it in a bit different way, something like this. I hope it works better. So user. And I can actually take this user somehow and put it up. Okay, well, you get the idea, right? Obviously, I'm still new to it. Now, there is a pin and there is a user. If I decide to store a pin in and or a user, I need to define the things that I need to place in order for an object to be considered a pin. A pin should have obviously a location, right? And a user doesn't need one. So here we're going to have latitude and longitude. Longitude, so lat and long. And user, why should I actually put latitude or longitude here? Obviously here I'm going to have a username, right? So this is going to be a username. I need to have a password. I need to have, I don't know, something else. For example, we can say country, right? So we can choose from which country I'm coming. But in the pin, I need a latitude and longitude. And again, I can have a username, right? So which is the user creating the pin? Sorry for my writing. Also, I can have something else. So these things are called schemas, and we're defining them as a model. Now in the model, I'm going to begin with pin. So I'm going to say new file and I'm going to call it pin.js. Now in this pin.js, I again am defining the schema of what an object needs to have in order for me to consider it being a pin. Now the first thing we want to do is to say mongoose is going to be equal to require mongoose. Now we need this because we're going to export what we do as a mongoose object. So I'm going to say const and I'm going to call it pin schema is going to be equal to a new mongoose dot schematic. There we go. Dot schema and open brackets, open curly brackets. Let's write stuff. So a pin should be having a couple of things. I'm going to go with username. I'm going to go with username because I need to know which user I used in order to create the following pin. Now I'm going to say type is going to be equal to string, and I'm going to say required is going to be equal to true. Now here I'm not sure if it's going to be require or required. I think it's going to be required. Required, yeah, I think it's with D, not just require. So first, that's the only thing that we want. We want a username, and that's it. After that, I'm going to say title. Now, you remember in my, do dots and curly. So you remember in my, actually in the beginning of this video, when we're talking about pins, we have a couple of things to set. Title, location, rating, and stuff like that. So next one is title. We're going to have a string, right? Because we need a name. I'm going to say required is going to be equal to true. And also I'm going to say minimum, we have 3 characters, right? So in order for this to be called a valid title, I need to have at least 3. Then I'm going to have rating. So rating is going to be a bit more complicated. Type is going to be a number, right? So from 1 to 5 stars. Then I'm going to say required is going to be equal to true. And then I'm going to say min is going to be 1 and max is going to be 5. So we're rating from 1 to 5 stars. You have seen this in the video and into the announcement, and you know that we are either choosing 1 star or 5 stars. It doesn't really matter. In Revolut, for example, you have these smiley faces. So you have this mad face, you have this, and you have this, right? So obviously the schema over there is going to be min 1 and max is going to be 3. It's going to be 3 because we're either going to choose this, this, or this. So smiley face, neutral, or very, very sad face. Obviously, we can do the same thing here, but I decided to go with stars. Then I need latitude and longitude. So this is going to be how am I going to position the pin in the map. So latitude is going to be a number. And of course, is going to be required. So it's going to be very important for me to have a latitude because obviously a pin is not a pin if I'm not having a latitude. And here, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to write it like this. All right, so latitude, longitude is the following thing. So type again is going to be number and required obviously is going to be true. It is very important to have longitude and latitude, otherwise we're not going to be able to position stuff in the map. And finally, I'm going to have description. So I'm going to say descript, or let's say description like this. And I'm going to say type is going to be equal to string, required is going to be true, and that's it. At least that's what I think about. Let me just close this. At least that's what I can think of straight from the get-go, right? So I'm going to have description, longitude, latitude, rating, title, and a username. I think that's all right. We don't need password again because we do not care. And finally, I'm going to include timestamps. So timestamps is going to be equal to true. I want the timestamps because I want to know this user created this pin how many hours ago, or days, or years, or months. You need to know these. Now, that's all good. We already have the pin schema. We're not using it. We're not doing anything with it. So for now, it is completely useless. Here, where actually you can see the Mongo schema, we have this. We keep them follow of the brackets because you can obviously make them wrong. And here you're going to have comma, timestamps, true. So this is not going to be part of the schema, right? It's going to be like think afterwards saying, okay, when I'm saving this schema, I want to know the date. It's very important for me. In order for me to export this and actually use it later, I'm going to say module.exports, and I'm going to export, what am I going to be exporting? The schema, but in order for me to export a schema, I need to create a model, and I do this by saying mongoose.model, passing a model name, so I'm going to have pin, like this, and what kind of a schema I'm going to do for my model? Obviously, the schema that I made, the pin schema. There we go. So that's pretty much it. So now you can see that everything is lit up, we're using it, and obviously we're exporting it, we're not importing it, meaning that we're not using it yet, but you rest assured that we're going to do it very, very soon. Now, the second thing that I need to do is the user schema. Now, the user schema is going to be a bit more, not so complicated and so long. So let's actually go and create it. I'm going to say new file here, and I'm going to call it user.js. I think that's all right. User.js or user. Yeah, I think user, not users. I'm just going to follow here. It's pin schema and not pins, right? Because we're defining how a single modular user and a single modular pin is going to look. So again, I'm going to say const mongoose is going to be equal to a require mongoose in order for me to start my schema. And now I'm going to say const user schema. Schema is going to be equal to new mongoose dot schema. All right, there we go. And the same thing. Now, what does a user need to have? Obviously, here you can define your own stuff, but for this project, we're going to have a username. Also, we're going to have a email, because this is what we're going to be using for registration. And of course, we're going to have a password. So that's pretty much it. These are the only things that I'm going to have. And again, I do want the timestamps, so I'm going to say timestamps true. Very interesting. So a username is obviously going to be of type string, right? We're not going to say username 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're not going to allow that. Required is going to be equal to something happened here. Required is going to be equal to true. I do want to create a user having a username, right? That's like a necessity. Then I'm going to say min, I can choose 3 characters long user, or max, I can choose 20 characters long. And of course, we want to be equal unique. So I want it to be unique because I am going to not only do it by email, right? We're going to write it in an email again, but I do not want the same user to be existing multiple times. So for example, if I'm going to be creating a pin, right? So for example, I think this is, oh, that's a very horrible pin. How can I? Yeah, let's say that we are having a pin. This pin is created by, I don't know, Spidey, right? So Spider-Man. And the Spidey is saying, okay, this location, for example, Italy here, right? So this is going to be Rome, is 5 out of 5. And then another user comes and rates the exact same location. So again, I can write it like this. I think this one is better. And this user is rating it 1 out of 5 because he doesn't like the pizzas over there, and it's called Spidey. So it's very interesting. So who is Spidey, right? Because we're having 2 Spideys, something like this, and we're not entirely sure what is your opinion about Rome. So obviously, we're not going to allow that. Now, when we're talking about email, we're going to have the same thing. So I'm going to say type is going to be equal to string. We're not going to allow just numbers. Also, I'm going to say it's going to be equal to true, required. Max, I'm going to give 50 characters. And I'm going to say unique, I want it to be true. I do not want the same user to be in my database multiple times. The password is going to be equal to string. Then I'm going to say required true. And by the way, here we're saying string, but again, you can, if you think about it, you can write this because this can be represented as a string, right? So in a certain way, we need to write a regular expression, not to allow just numbers, but yeah, this is something out of the scope of this. So min is going to be equal to 6. Now, I do want my password to have minimum of 6 symbols, right? In order to be a bit more secure, even though we're not caring about security currently, but this is how you're going to be writing it. So for example, in Blizzard, they have something like this, right? I believe it was 12. I'm not entirely, or 8. I think it was 8. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to write 6 as a minimum. Now, the final part is to export this user schema. As you can see, it's not lit up, so obviously nobody uses it. And in order to do that, we're going to say module, export, and this is going to be equal to a mongoose model with the user name. So this is going to be the name of the model. So we're going to say user. And what kind of a schema we're going to use? We're going to use our schema created over here. Boom, there we go. So currently we have the models, pin and user. Good job on that if you followed so far. Good job if you're not having problems. And in order for us to see if we're not having problems, let's just run it very quickly. And you're going to see that everything works as expected. So everything is green over here. The things that we're handling are green. Obviously, it can be green because here we can write whatever we want. We're not using any of these yet, but we will. So good job so far. We already have the models, we already have the schemas, we already connected to the DB. Like 50% of the work is done, right? Now what we need to do is to create the REST API. All right. I think I'm going to pause it right over here, and I'm going to come back after a couple of hours to finish the REST API. All right. Now, we said that we're going to be building the API, right? The first thing that I want to do before building the API is to actually put something that is called express JSON. Now, I'm going to be placing this right below this line over here, and I'm going to say application.use, and I'm going to say express.json. This is going to allow me to send JSON data back and receive to the client, because otherwise it's going to be a bit more tedious. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a route folder. We're going to be creating a route folder, and I'm going to be calling it routes. And here we're going to be creating our 2 routes that we initially had. The first route is going to be the pin, and the second route is going to be users. Now, let's talk about these routes just a little bit before we actually continue. So the route has a certain function. When I'm typing something in my URL, I want it to be a bit more manageable. So if I type API, for example, and let's go like this, I think I'm going to do this. I'm just going to make it a bit more. All right. So let's say that API, and I'm going to do slash and pins/get, right? So this is going to be the query that I'm going to have on my URL. When I'm having this, or I'm having this, users get, I want to distinguish between the users and the pins. Obviously, I can write API get, just get, right? But what am I going to getting? Am I going to get the pins? Am I going to get the users? And that's why we're creating a route folder with different routes over there that we're going to be using in order for us to route to the proper use. Now, we're doing this as a developer to be a bit more easy for you to follow it. So let's go to the routes folder and create new file. And I'm going to call this pins.js. Pins.js. This is going to be the file and the JavaScript file that is going to be responsible for the pins queries, right? So whenever you're actually going into, and I can actually show you. Now we have already built the Instagram bot, but let's say that I'm going to go from YouTube, right? So if I go to YouTube and I'm going to go to my channel. So I'm going to go to my channel currently, which is Lead Engineer, and you're going to see I have YouTube comp channel, right? Right over here. And then I have a certain stuff. So what we're actually saying is, okay, I'm going to go to YouTube. Then I'm going to be searching for a channel. This is going to go to a different route, right? Because if I click on a video, I'm not going to have this channel here. Or I'm going to have a channel, and then I'm going to have not the channel ID, but rather the video ID. And let's actually check it out. I'm going to go to this channel. Are you a okay? And you're going to see YouTube.com, and then we have watch. And we have the ID of the video. Do you see? It's interesting. Now we're not in anyone's channel. We are in my own channel, and I'm trying to watch a video. So you can see how this changes based on the query that you do. And we want to obviously split them. So pins, users, if you have videos, we're going to create obviously a different route videos because we want them to be split. Now, the first thing we want to do, since this is going to be a router, I'm going to say const router. And this is going to be equal to a require. And of course, we're going to be using express for these. So express, something happened with my IntelliSense, but I'm going to say dot, and I should, yeah, there we go, dot router. So currently what I have is a router. This is going to allow me to do router dot, and you can see get, you can also see post, you can see delete, and you can see put, right? So this is very important. We're having 4, right? So put, post, delete, and get. We're not going to be talking about these in depth. But if you want me to be talking about the theory of REST API, then leave a comment below, and I can, of course, make a tutorial about it as well. It is going to be a bit more boring, I would say, because it has a lot of theory in it. So let's actually go with what kind of a model am I actually going to use? Now I'm going to say const, and I'm going to go pin. This is going to be require, and it's going to be requiring, you guessed it right, modus pin. If I go to pin over here, you're going to see that I am exporting it as a model, and the model name is going to be pin. And we're using the pin schema, right? So let's go to routes, and here I am having the pin as a model. Now I can work with this pin and I can do certain stuff. The first thing that we need to be taking is creating a pin. So let's say creating a pin. Creating a pin is going to be obviously me placing some data and push it to the server. So we have to have a method here that's going to be taking it and storing it into the DB, right? Because we have some data. So let's say data. And the data that we should have is the data that is in the model folder. So if you remember it, it's going to be, I believe, username. So let's write it like this. So it's going to have a username. It's going to have a lat and lon. It is going also to have a description. And I believe it's going to have a rating. I think that was it of these 5. If I'm missing something, of course, we could go here and check it out. So username, oh yeah, title. Yeah, I missed title. So the data that's sent from a model, from a client, should be having all of these things in order for me to create a pin and store it into DB. So this is creating a pin, and after that we need to get all pins. Now, if we decide to develop this app, yeah, just to say, if we decide to develop this app more, we can add different friends into our social, I don't know, media, and then we can get the pins only for certain friends. So here we're not going to get all pins, or we can actually get all pins and filter friends. So see only the pins who are your friends, right? So this is obviously something that you can do, but for now we're just going to get all pins, right? Every single user can see every single pin created by other users. Creating a pin is going to be a post method. So I'm going to use router.post, and here I need to specify what kind of a path am I actually going to do in order to get to this method. I'm going to say nothing. For now, I'm going to say nothing because I want here to, you're going to see how we're going to make it. We are going to make it API/pins/ and if it's a post method, it's just going to enter here. If you do not understand this yet, just wait a little bit because, as I said, it's not that easy. It is a bit complicated. After all, it's a full stack app, so you're going to get it with me. For now, let's write the following. We're going to write an async function. So I'm going to say request response, and I am going to do certain stuff. So async is a state machine. We're not going to be talking about this. Do not worry about this. For now, just write it like that. And here you're going to see request and response. So these are 2 parameters. You can call them A and B, obviously, so it doesn't really matter. But the request is going to have a body, and we're going to be working with it since that's what we're going to be sending as a client. And the response is what we're actually expected to send back to the client. So that's the only thing that you need to know from here. All right, what is the first thing that we want to do? Obviously, we want to construct a pin. So we want to post a pin. This is going to store a pin into the DB and store to DB. So this is going to first need to create a pin. I can say const new pin, newly or added pin, or we can just call it pin candidate. So candidate is going to be equal to a new pin of request.body. So how are we actually doing this new pin? Well, pin is coming from models, and you can see that it has to have all of these names, and of course the naming should be correct, in order to map it in a model, right? We're creating an object from the request body. So now we're actually having an object. If we have only a username, right? Only just a username. So the username is going to be, I don't know, something blank, like a space. Then this is going to be valid. Now we're having a pin candidate with a username, obviously space. Now that, however, should be pushed to Mongo, right? To our database. So let's actually do that. Now, we do not want to push empty pins because we have set over here that everything here is going to be required. And Mongo is going to do this perfectly for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to catch the error and just write something like that, like this. Try and catch, right? Very simple and very easy. In fact, I'm going to put it like this because I think it's easily readable, more easily readable this way. So what are we actually going to do? Well, first of all, I want to say, okay, I'm going to try to save this pin, right? Push it to the DB. I'm going to say const saved pin is going to be equal to await new pin, our pin candidate, dot save. Good. Since we're creating an object of type pin, and the pin is coming from here, and it is a Mongoose model, we are having this method save. And here it's const. I don't know why I cannot write it properly. So as you can see, we're trying to save it. This, however, can take a lot of time, right? Because you have to keep in mind, we are connecting the DB, our DB is in the cloud, and usually even if it's in the local storage, the storage file might be logged from the antivirus, right? So this is going to be the antivirus system, and it can log the file. So this can actually wait for, I don't know, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, depends on what we're trying to do. So that's why it needs to be a wait here. We're not going to block it. After that, if everything's successful, I'm going to say response status. I'm going to go with 200, and I'm going to send as a JSON the saved pin, right? So I'm just going to push to the client. Okay, this is the pin that you saved in the DB. Here it is. You can read it out. If you do not like it, you can obviously delete it, right? And finally, I'm going to console log, and I'm going to be console logging. I'm going to come here, and I'm going to take this console logging the fact that we are successful. So console log 42M success, and here we can say pin added to DB, right? Very good. So if we're not having a problem, the pin was successfully added here, and in the next query, you can actually take the pin. Obviously, React is going to refresh the route, and then it's going to go fetch some data again. So we're going to work it out. However, if an error occurs, and the error is because probably we have only username, and we're not going to be allowed to say save, because here, again, we are having required true. So we have to have the description, longitude, latitude. These properties we have to have. And in order for this save to not throw an error. If it throws an error, obviously, I'm just going to say console log. And here we're going to go failed. And here I'm going to go 41. It's going to be red. Failed, probably to add pin, but I'm going to say failed and then pin added to DB. I think I'm going to leave it like that. Or actually, let's go failed, adding pin to DB. Yeah. And here, actually, I can change it like this. I do want it to be more unique, right? I do want to be sure that it's easy to follow. Okay, since we're actually having an error, we need to know to let the client that we have a problem, right? Because the client is just going to do something it's not going to understand. The API is going to say it over here, but we're not returning anything to the client, and the client is just going to say, this is the React, right? The React library, and we're just, okay, doing some fetch, and we're not returning anything, but we're not having, the user doesn't know what happened. Are we having no problems? Why is my thing not doing anything? So here I'm just going to say response status 500 and .json error. So I'm just going to send the error as a JSON, and I'm going to give it an internal server error status. Good. So here is what we're actually going to be doing with this router post. I don't think anything else is to be added here, and we can just move straight to the get opens. Get opens is going to be, again, something very simple. It's going to be router.get this time. You have to understand that here we're having post and here we're having get. So it is fairly easy to understand. Post is we're doing post when we want to create something, put when we want to update something, delete when we want to delete, and get to get something. So again, what is the route that we're going to be doing? Nothing, because I'm actually not caring. We can write it like this, right? Ghetto pins or pins getter, something like this. But I'm not going to do anything because I don't need to. Again, it's going to be an async function, so request response. And let's see what we're going to do with this request response. Good. Once we're actually going here, we're not trying to search for a specific pin. In fact, we're trying to search for every single pin. So I'm going to say try, and then again, I'm going to say catch error. Let's open and close these. And here, I'm going to be doing the following. So I'm going to say const pins. Now, these are going to be every single pin that we found in our model. So it's going to be await. Again, we're using await because we might have problems with the file. Let's say that the file is over here and the antivirus system is working on this file. We're trying to access it, but we cannot because it's blocked, right? So it's saying blocked. So try again. And then we're going to be trying again after 1 second, then blocked again, then try again, blocked again, and so on and so forth. We can wait here indefinitely. So we're just going to put a synchronous wait. Then I'm going to use the model. So that's going to be pin. We have set over here that this is going to be our model, and I'm going to say dot find. Now find is actually going to find every single pin that we're having in our DB, which is great. Now if everything is actually working fine, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to say, all right, console log success finding opens. So finding opens, right? All right, everything is fairly decent, and what's left for us to do is to actually say that the status was okay, and I want to send my pins to the user, to the client. And of course, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to need to copy it over here and say failed. So I'm going to say failed, finding all pins. And of course, I'm going to say internal error, and I'm going to send the error as a JSON to the client. And that's it. That's really it. That's all we have to do for our API on the pins. It's very, very nice, very unique, and it's very easy to understand, I believe. And the final part is to export it as a router, so we can use it in our index.js right over here, because this is our setter, right? This is the function that we're running in order to set everything. So let's actually go here and say module.exports, and what we're going to be exporting is a router. All right, fairly decent. So we're going to say const router, this require express, right? And we're just going to say module exports, it's going to be equal to router. And then we can obviously use this in index.js. Okay, now we're going to go and test this thing. No, actually, what we're going to be doing is do the users routing again, and then we're going to test both of them. Yeah, I think that's going to be better. All right, moving on to the users. Okay, so now we got the pins. So let's go with the users route. So here I'm going to say users.js, and yeah, it's time to build the REST API. So the first thing that I want to do is to create router. It's going to be equal to require express dot, come on, the router. All right, very nice. So now that we actually have a router, I also want, as in pins, to take this pin, right? Well, obviously for me it's not going to be pin. I'm going to copy paste it. I'm going to write it. So const user is going to be equal to require, and then we're going to be using the user model. So that's going to be models, and then I'm going to say user. All right, so far so good. And currently we want to, actually I'm going to, yeah, so I was thinking about when we're logging in, we can have a password like, for example, this 78. Then we can actually encrypt it, right? And get something like some gibberish. And then we're going to store the encryption into the DB, because usually you do not store this password in the DB. And I think that this is what I'm going to do. And in order for me to do that, I am first going to install a package. So that's going to be npm install, and then I'm going to go with bcrypt. So I'm going to go with bcrypt. I'm going to install it. This is going to be a library that's going to help me to generate salt and pepper. Actually, I'm not joking. They are called like this, salt and pepper, really. So this is going to allow me to take some input as a password, plain text. So for example, this as a password, go through the bcrypt, right? So the bcr, and then produce some random gibberish, which you're going to see something like this, right? And that's what we're going to store in the DB. So if you are actually a hacker and you manage to get the database, you're going to get this, and you're not going to know what kind of a password this is. So probably you're going to ask yourself, okay, well, if I'm storing this encrypted thing, how am I going to be sure that I will be logging in with the correct password? Well, it's actually simple, because if I take this password and I push it through the BCR, then I'm going to produce absolutely the same hash, right? So I'm going to produce absolutely the same hash, and if these hashes are equal, then it means that you have written the right password. If I change even one thing here, so if I change, let's say, 1 to not 8 but 9, then I'm going to produce a different hash, right? I'm going to do this. And obviously these hashes are not equal, so you have written your own password. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to say const bcrypt, and it's going to be equal to require, and I'm going to say bcrypt. There we go. I'm going to show you how to use it. All right, now we're having actually two things that we want. So the first thing we're having is register, and the second thing that we're having is a login as a plain user. Now, that is actually, I think that's pretty much it. So register and login, and we're not going to do anything else. We're not going to add friends. We're not going to do anything. So first, we're going to be taking care of the register. So this is going to be router. And keep in mind, we're using router because of this. And since we're registering, we're creating something, we're going to be using post. Now here, we're just going to say /register. Obviously, we can leave it like this, but I believe it's better here to say register. All right, so this is going to be register. And of course, we're going to go async request response. The same thing that we had, and Let me just make it a little bit better looking. Okay, good. So when we're registering, we are actually placing something in our request body. And this something is going to be the username, the email, and the password. Keep in mind that if I want to register, all of these three should be inside my body when I'm doing the query. So now, thinking that I have that, the first thing that I want to do is try, and then I'm going to catch. So let's do that. We're going to do this for the logger. And in try, I'm going to first generate passwords, right? In order for me to generate password, what I can do is I can create the salt. So this is going to be salt, and then I can say await decrypt gen salt. And I'm going to make it 10 symbols. The salt is something that we add to every single password. So let's say that our password is AAA, and the salt is going to add some random gibberish over here just to make it even harder for hackers to break your password. And now I need to actually take the hashed password, right? And I need to make it hashed. So what I'm going to say is I can say const encrypted pass, and this is going to equal await decrypt dot hash. And what am I actually going to hashing? Well, I'm going to be hashing request.body.pass, and here I need to make sure password. So I'm going to say request.body.password, and I'm going to be giving it salt. All right. And finally, we are creating a new user. Now, this is the encrypted password. What we're doing is we are taking the password from request body, so 1 to 8, and then we're actually pushing this salt and we're actually hashing it, right? So that's what we're doing. So now that we actually have it hashed, we need to create a new user, and I'm going to say const new user is going to be equal to a new user, and here we're going to have some data. So the username is going to be, and by the way, this is very important to be the same like these. So username, email, and password. But if you have pass here, you're going to write pass, not password, right? So it's very important. Username is going to be request body, and dot, we're going to be searching for username. Then we're going to have email, and it's going to be request.body.email, and then we're going to have password request, actually not request body, but encrypted pass. Now, this encrypted pass came from the request body password, but just it's now encrypted and it has salt. So that's what I'm going to do in the new user. Since the new user has to be stored in the DB, I'm not going to be storing it with the plain text password. I'm just going to hash it with salt, with everything, and then I'm going to store it. Now what I need to do is obviously push the user to DB, right? So this is what is going to save my user. I'm going to say user saved is going to be equal to await new user dot save. Oops, new user dot. Okay, I'm not seeing save for some reason. Here I have pin candidate dot save, as you can see, because pin candidate is a new pin. But here I have a new user, and the user is models user, which is going to be mongoose model. And for some reason, I do not have, let's see, await, and then we have new user dot, and we have to have save. I'm not entirely sure why we don't, but as you can see, it lights up if I. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting because here it's showing, right? As you can see, if I type control, you can see that this is some promise, some random gibberish, because it's a pin. However, this thing over here is not. Yeah, probably because if we're actually having any problems with the model, this is going to blow, right? And we're going to catch it. So I'm just going to leave it like this. So I'm going to leave it like save. And also I'm going to console log, and I'm just going to copy console log from here because it's going to be a successful one. If everything happens here, it means that we have already saved something to the DB. So this is going to be success on registering user. So registering user. And of course, finally, what I want to do is to send it. So I'm going to say status 200, and I'm going to JSON. And what I'm going to do actually is user saved dot ID. So I'm just going to send the ID of the user. I'm not going to send the email. I'm not going to send anything. I'm just going to push the user. All right, that's good. And finally here we're having the failure. So here I'm going to say 41 failed, registering user, and of course I need to send the error. So this is going to be status 500 JSON error, right? Because again, if we're not able to register a user, as you saw in the video before, so the first minute of this video in the announcement, you were going to see that when I try to register a user without pushing anything, I have a notification. This notification, however, is received because we are sending this internal error. And of course, we're sending the error. So here you can send whatever message you want. So I think that's pretty much it for this. So we have actually registered the user, and now usually we have to test it. But before I do test it, I'm going to now log in. So login is going to be router.post again, and it's going to be /login. As you can see, if I say post like this, it's not going to go here. It's always going to go in here. That's why I just add the names login and register. Again, it's going to be an asynchronous function. So request response, and let's see what we're going to have inside. So inside, I'm going to try with try. So, and I'm going to catch an error. So I want to try and be sure that I'm not having a failure, right? Because I do want to keep note of it. If I fail, if I succeed somewhere, it's very important for me. So let's go with try. And currently I have to find the user, right? So login is going to go to the DB, and I'm going to have DB over here. So this is going to be the cloud. I'm going to go to the DB and I'm going to ask, okay, do you have my current email with this password? And the DB is going to say, yes, I do. Or no, I don't. Right? So either yes or no. If I cannot log in with a certain user, it means that probably this user doesn't exist in the database. It was either deleted, disabled, blocked, whatever, and we are going to have problems. So what we want to do is to find something, right? So I'm going to go with find a specific user, all right? And I'm going to say const user is going to be equal to await. We're going to use our model, so user, this thing over here. And I'm going to say find one. Again, it's not lighting up for some reason. What we're going to be searching for is the username to be equal to request.body.username. Very simple. If we're not having anything, right, it means that we have a problem. So I'm going to say if not user. So if we do not have any user, I'm going to say, let's go with this. Like this, okay? So if we have not found any user, we can say that either a username or password was failed, right? Currently, we know that the username is a problem, not the password. But you usually don't say to the client, your password is incorrect or your username is incorrect. You send them a tricky question. Check your password or username. So for this example, I'm going to say failed logging to user, something like this. And also I'm going to say status 400 JSON, and I'm going to say wrong username or password. This is the text that I'm going to be sending. We know that it's the username, right? Because we are searching for a username with request body username. But as I said, in production code, you're going to be sending username or password. You do not want to let the people know what they're actually mistaking. Good. However, if we are actually having a user, it means that there is something stored in the DB, right? And let's say that the email, for example, I don't know, MERN, and then we have gmail.com, right? You know how this goes. We have an account with this. Now we need to check the password. So I'm going to have also a password, right? So 1 to 9. And I need to hash this and check against the saved hash. So in order for me to do that, I need to validate my password. And I'm going to do the following. Valid password is going to be equal to await. And by the way, I'm using await because if you go into the bcrypt library, you're going to see in the documentations that everything is asynchronous, and they are actually saying to you, okay, everything that you run with await, because it should be asynchronous, right? That's very important. This I know from the documentation, so that's why. But again, you can just write await every single time you're using something in bcrypt, and you're going to be fine. So bcrypt.compare. And what am I going to be comparing? Well, I'm going to be comparing request body password with our user that we have actually found, user.password. We know that user has a password because obviously it's not going to be saved in the database otherwise, and that it is what allows us to actually be sure that this can be comparable. Okay, so if the password is not valid, I'm just going to console log problem. So I'm going to write like this. And now we know that, again, this failed because the password is wrong. But again, we're just going to say status 400.json, and we're going to be sending wrong username or password. That's very interesting. So every single time, here is the username, here is the password, but we do not say anything. However, if the password is valid, I need to be sending that we have successfully logged in. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to console log first here, because I do want to know in the server success, logging to user, and I'm going to send 200 JSON, and I'm going to be sending our user that we have actually managed to log in with. So it's pretty much this one. The user is going to have quite a lot of details. It's going to have the hashed password, so probably it's not going to be good to send. But again, you can just send here something like, okay, good job, you are logged in, right? There shouldn't be a problem. Catching the error is going to be from, let me just close these because it, okay. So finding specific user. If this fails, we're going to go here, and I'm going to obviously copy the failed command, and I'm going to say failed logging to user, something like this, or logging in with user. And now I'm just going to say status, again, server error, and I'm going to send the error. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so we're already ready with the REST API. And here, the final part is for me to say module.export. And what am I going to be exporting? I'm going to be exporting router. So now we're going to go and test it out. It's going to be a bit more difficult probably. So be sure to install Postman, and we're going to see each other into, actually I'm going to put it in one video. So after probably 10-15 minutes, and for you, you're not going to even realize it. All right, we're back, and now I'm going to go to the index, and here we have a couple of things to do. Now we do have the Mongoose Connect, and I think that before listening to a port, here I can open it, if I'm not mistaken, .catch, okay, all right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say application.use, and I'm going to be using routes. So I'm going to be using the following. Now let me just copy this and put it like this. And here, first of all, I need to take them out. So I'm going to say bin route is going to be equal to require. And I'm going to say routes, bins. And then this is going to be user routes, require routes, users, right? Users and bins. Yeah, okay, good. Good. And finally, we have to use them. So here we are actually using routes, since keep in mind, we are exporting them as routes. This is what allows me to actually choose a route over here and to use my bins and my users. So here I can say API bins, and here I can say API users, right? So whenever I actually go into the URL and I type API, you're going to see this. Let's say bins, and I type /, I'm going to get here. Now, both of them are different, right? Both post and get. So if I actually decide to post, I don't need to write anything else. And if I decide to get, I do not need to write anything else. So here we're not having any problems. In users, however, I should be typing either login or register, because both of these are post. And if I just delete this and this, I'm always going to end up into the first one that's available. That's why here we're having register and here we're having login. So in order for me to actually finish it, I need to use some routes over here. And when I say API pins, I'm going to use the pin route. And when I use API users, I'm going to use the user route. And I think I have a, yeah, I have a mistake over here, user route. All right, good. So let's actually now clear list and not index if everything is up and running. And it's time for us to test our API. Actually, I failed to start my server. And here you can see second argument to model must be a module or string. Be sure to use mongoose.model and not model with big. So as you can see, I have a fail here. And that is why, by the way, if you actually remember here, let me just find it where it was. It was in register. And here I couldn't type safe, but now it actually finds it. Yeah. So thank you for dear Node.js for explaining the error. And let's try run it again. So yeah, everything is running nice. Okay, time for us to test the API. All right, now I'm going to leave a link at this site, but this site is called Postman, and Postman is going to allow you to test your APIs. So here I'm going to be clicking, this is what you see when you log in with your profile. And keep in mind that you probably need to install Postman agent. If what I'm showing you now is not working, install Postman agent. This is the download desktop app over here, because this is what's attaching you to the local host and allows to do stuff. So I'm going to click on workspaces. I'm going to click on get here, and you're going to see this beautiful overview. And here you can type your URL, the command, and then obviously we're going to send. So let's actually open up what we have. And I'm going to go begin with pins. Now pins, I want to get all pins, and actually do I want that? Yeah, I'm going to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is go to index, and you can see localhost is going to be 7800. So there's going to be localhost at 0.78000. And then we are having this API pins. So API pins, and everything should be matching. As you can see, localhost, the port, API pins. And now what I want to do is to go to pins and actually post something. I'm going to click on post. I'm going to go to body, and somewhere around here, I should get row JSON. There we go. And what I want is to create a pin. So adding pin to failed, and it failed. Yeah, it should fail because we don't have anything. That's good. But now I do want to create something. So if I go to pin, you're going to see all of these shenanigans that we need to have. So it's quite a lot, but let's go with username, and that's what I'm going to do. Username is going to be equal to Spider-Man. Let's go with Spider-Man. All right, username is going to be Spider-Man. Then we have title, and title is going to be equal to Rome. And let me just skip this so it doesn't get boring. Okay, so what we have is the latitude, longitude, rating, description, and we are Spider-Man. So I'm going to go to API pins, and I'm going to be using post. So this should naturally head us to this photo over here. Now let's actually go and see sent. Requests can be sent in public workspaces right now, though we're working on it. Okay, are we in public though? My workspace. Okay, let's click on my workspace. Sorry about that. Yeah, leave. And I didn't know. All right, I'm in my workspace currently, and here I decided to start a new AP. So let's actually go HTTP localhost 7800 API pins. Here we're going to have the post. Body is going to be row JSON text, and I'm going to do this. Oops, sorry. So username Spider-Man, title Rome, and this. I'm going to send, and I'm going to get back something. So let's actually check the logs. You can see success adding pin to DB. That's very nice. Now I want to get all pins. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to say API pins. I don't need to have anything in my JSON body. I can type get, and there we go. These are all the pins. Now, as you can see, these pins are quite a lot because I'm still using the same database. But these are all the pins that we actually got. So here, if I go to pins, you can see success, finding all pins. Let's actually try to break the creation. So if I go to post API pins, I'm going to delete the description. And now if I try to post, I'm getting an error message. That description is required. And here in the server logs, you can see failed adding pin to database. Great. So everything is actually working fine. Now let's move on to the uses. In order for me to test uses, here I need to have API, users, and I have to have register. Why do I have to have this register over here? Well, because I've set in my index that I'm going to be using API users, using the user route. But in user route over here, I have router post register and router post login. So if I'm trying to register, I need to have username, email, and password. So let's actually do that. I'm going to have username, I'm going to have email, and I'm going to have password over here. All right, I'm going to delete all of these. And now I'm going to have email. The username is going to be Spider-Man username. Email is going to be Rome Gmail, and the password is going to be 55567. I'm going to send, and I'm not getting anything. I'm just taking internal server error. And if I check the logs, registering user failed. It did fail. However, I know why, because these are only 5 and the password should be 6. So this should work. But I do want to see why I'm not sending any problem. So as you can see, registering, and we are having a problem right over here. And we should be sending the error. I'm not entirely sure why we're not. We're just sending this .json error, right? Everything should be all right. So here probably we are not taking anything as an error object, and that's why we're not doing anything. So now we're actually, as you can see, this is an empty object. And here we have internal server error. Now, if I actually type 6 elements, because if you remember, in user, I have to have minimum 6 elements, right, in order for my password to be considered correct. And I'm going to try to register with Spider-Man username, and actually it's going to be 6 6s because it's very easy to understand. Send, and again we had problems. Very interesting. So failed registering user. Now it's time to debug. All right, let's see what the problem is. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I know. When I actually changed this user schema over here, I didn't restart the server. So let me just clear and start it again. I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be the problem, but as I said, I think it's going to be close. So again, I'm going to try register, and no, we have problems. Okay, it's not it. So I have to check it out, and I'll come in a bit. All right, now what the problem was, password is not going to be a number. Now, if you actually go here, you can see failed registering user. I obviously tried to debug it. And here we have finally a success, registering user. And if I go to user, you're going to see password is type string, and I'm adding a number. So that was a problem. Now, it's very crappy that we're not producing any correct error to send the error, but it's okay. So now we actually have a registered user. My email is Spider-Man username, and my email is Rome, and my password is 6 6s. So let's actually try to log in. Login is going to be not register over here, rather login. And now it's still going to be a post. How do I know that? Well, because we have router.post here. And what we're doing is we're finding some username with the requested username, and then we're matching the passwords. So we're not even required to have an email. I can delete this email, and I am going to try to do 7 6s. I'm going to log in, and you're going to see wrong username or password. This is the problem that we're actually sending. And here in the logger, we're saying logging failed. And if, of course, I do write my correct password, I do log in. Here is the user. So this is the ID, the email, the hashed password. As you can see, this is the password that is hashed. And in the logger, I can see success, logging to user, but I have failed with the color. The color should be 2. All right. So it should be green. And if I go node index again, just restart the server because we changed something. And now I can head on to say login again. And success logging to server. All right. It's going to be logging to user is 42. Right. So is this not, let me just check it real quick. This should be Control S, users, 42M, success, logging to user. Yeah, everything should be working now. Did I not save? All right, let's try again. I do want to see it with a green color. It should be green. Yeah, there we go. Success, logging to user. Good. So everything that we have written in our API actually works. So good job. If you got so far, that's some heavy work on your side. Go get a break. And in the next video, we are going to produce the client. In the client, we have quite a lot of work. So be embraced. And thanks for watching. If you found this useful and if you have any problems, leave them down in the comments below. Like and subscribe. And we're going to see each other into the next video. Cheers.